Hi, I'm Chaplain Michael, and I'm glad to be with you today. Thanks for tuning in and watching a little bit with me. Take about 15 minutes or so to read a Bible passage, and I reflect on it with you, and then I'll pray. We're using the Revised Common Lectionary, a set of readings that goes through the Bible throughout over a 3-year time period, and I'm looking now in the Gospel of Matthew. And we're reading this word in Matthew chapter 9. While he was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her, and she will live." Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind and touched the edge of his cloak. Isn't that remarkable? She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be healed." Jesus turned and saw her. "Take heart, daughter," he said. "Your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, "Go away. The girl is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread through all the region. All that region heard about Jesus. Jesus entered these places where we feel most burdened. We might feel alone. We might feel afraid. We might be isolated. We might be locked in fear or overwhelmed with grief. And Jesus says, "Take courage. Trust in me, and all will be well." That's what I see as a theme in this story. It's a story within a story. Take courage, trust in me, and all will be well. So there was a leader, a religious leader, a leader of the synagogue in Jesus' world, and he came before Jesus and knelt down in front of him. Mark and Luke give a fuller version of this exact story, and they notice that this man is called Jairus, and he was the ruler of the synagogue. He was a man of importance in that village, a lot of responsibility, a religious leader. He supervised the building. He arranged for weekly services at the synagogue. Everyone looked up to him. And when you're a person of significance like that, like a councilman or maybe a mayor, you tend to hold yourself with a certain air. But Jairus comes to Jesus on his knees. He didn't seem to care what others might think at this moment. He didn't think about how much of a scandal it might seem that he, a grown man, the head of the most important institution in our village, head of the synagogue, they're a religious community, and he's the head of the religious meeting place. Would he crawl on his knees before Jesus? But the most horrible thing had happened. "My daughter has died. I'm confused. I'm desperate. I'm overwhelmed. My daughter has died." I imagine he choked and he cried just to get those words out. He's on his knees in front of Jesus, so upset, so desperate. You know how death hurts us. The death of a child, I think it's the most miserable thing anyone can face. The death of your child. Some of you have experienced that. You've lost a child. Some of you have had miscarriages. Some of you lost a young child. Some lost a teenager. Some of you have experienced the death of a grown child. No matter what their age, the death of a child is a sorrow. I think it's beyond words. A close friend of ours had lost their son when he was in his early 30s. It was a few years ago. From that day on, they were filled with grief. The first 2 years after his death were miserable. Always cloudy, gray, sad. Every holiday brought tears. Family photos hurt them when they looked and saw his smiling face, the one of the son who's now gone. Their other children had grown. One has had a baby since then. Their families changed. But in their mind, that son who died is forever 34. It's painful. My child has died. This grieving father is pleading with Jesus. Put your hand on her and she will live. Put your hand on her, he said to Jesus, and she will live. He's acknowledging that she's died. But he believes that Jesus has a power that even greater than death. What faith he has. Courageous enough to get on his knees in front of Jesus. Bold enough to state his faith. I know it. If you put your hand on her, she'll live. Well, immediately Jesus goes with him and his disciples follow too. They hurriedly head towards this man's house. They need to rush. You know, it was the custom of that day that the dead should be buried by nightfall. Every minute wasted was another minute closer to when she would be placed in a tomb. But while they're on their way, a woman who had been subject to a bleeding for 12 long years comes up behind Jesus and touches the edge of his cloak. It may have touched a fringe or a tassel. In Jesus' day, the men would wear an overcloak, a cloth, and that would have tassels on the four corners of that cloth. She's crawling on the ground too, reaching out for Jesus just to touch the tassel. She said to herself, he has power to heal me. If I just touch the edge of his garment, I'll be healed. What faith? Well, it sounds a little bit superstitious, though. But what faith? He can heal me. She's determined to reach out to God through Jesus. But this nameless woman faced obstacles that would have kept her from being there that day. Would have kept her, these obstacles, from seeing Jesus, from touching him. You see, in Jesus' day, a woman who has a flow of blood was to stay home, be alone. No one was to touch her. No one could even sit on the same sofa as her. They would be considered unclean. And so this woman, who'd been bleeding for 12 years, would have been in isolation for years. To go out in public, she would risk being bumped and jostled by the crowds. That would have left them unclean. It was to great courage. She had a steady loss of blood for years, and wouldn't she have been anemic and weak? She had to walk fast to catch up to Jesus. This took a lot of effort on her part. Yet she sees her moment. And she must be almost like crawling on her hands and knees. The Bible doesn't say, but that's what I'm picturing. In order for her to grasp the cloak, the bottom edge, the fringe, the tassel. She sees her moment. She steps out from the fringes. She touches Jesus' cloak. And when he feels that touch, he stops, he turns to her, and the full light of the presence of Jesus shines on her. Her who must have been in the dark for years and years. And he says, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has healed you." And it wasn't just the touch that healed him. It was her faith in God through Jesus Christ. That's what healed her. And you know that word "take heart" in the original language literally means courage. Take heart, courage. And you can see that connection, can't you? Take heart. It's kind of a thing for, be brave, have some courage. Take courage. The kind of courage that it took for you to come seek me. Take heart, remain in that courage, continue with your faith, stand confidently because you are healed because of your faith. Not because of any magic about my robe, but because of your faith in God through me. Courage. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous, the Lord said to Joshua. Don't be terrified, don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God will go with you. He will be with you wherever you may go. Yeah, she had courage, a courageous faith in the one who would heal her. These two people needing help are at the end of their rope. They're desperate. They come to Jesus on their knees, one before him, one behind him. They felt maybe like you felt after a long illness, or maybe what you felt in the death of a loved one, your husband, your wife, your child. Desperate for some hope, desperate for some good news, desperate for some healing in life. And both of these people come to Jesus with a faith that's courageous, looking to Jesus for help in the face of huge obstacles, coming humbly, acknowledging that they can't solve their problems. They need the Lord to help them, to give them healing and life. And that's what they receive. The woman receives healing instantly. The man, his daughter, was raised from the dead by Jesus, who has power over death itself. Jesus cares about those who are at the edges of life and those who are at the fringes of life. He's the good shepherd who sees the suffering people as if helpless and harassed sheep, and he gathers them under his arms. He carries them close to his heart. He gives healing. He gives forgiveness. He gives life, life everlasting. So how might what you see here in this beautiful story of Jesus give you confidence and courage in your faith? We face death. We might have to face a long illness. But can we do that in an expectant or a courageous hope? Hope that believes that Jesus can hold us in life. Jesus can keep us. He will raise us into the Lord's presence when we die. And one day, Jesus will raise the dead. We know that because Jesus was raised from the dead. He's the firstborn of all who have fallen asleep. And his resurrection is the source of our courage in the face of prolonged illness and death. You can hold on to him and find all along as you rest your faith in Him, that He will hold on to you and never let you go. Jesus said, "Take courage, trust in me, and all will be well." Please pray with me. I'm going to pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.